Tonight, we begin in the damp breath of dawn where the Mekong River unrolls like a silver ribbon under the sleepy sun, and the air smells faintly of wet earth and the smoke from someone's small fire curling in the distance. You are standing barefoot in mud because why not, and the soil squelches between your toes in that oddly satisfying way. Before we step further, let me remind you, before we begin, if this little corner of calm has brought you any comfort, feel free to like the video and subscribe only if it feels genuine to you. No pressure. I'd also love to hear from you. Just drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always special to know we're all quietly gathered here from different corners of the world like a family, scattered but still connected. All right, now go ahead and dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan or a soft hum in the background. Nestle in, get cozy, and let's ease into tonight's story together. You are here thousands of years ago when the land that would become Cambodia is not yet a kingdom, but a quilt of small communities clinging to rivers, forests, and the generous floodplain. People with Austroasiatic roots, ancestors of today's Khmer, have been here since prehistory, coaxing rice from paddies long before skyscrapers or sushi existed. They weave baskets, fashion bronze tools, and fish with patience that even modern Netflix binges can't compete with. You watch a woman sprinkle grain into a carved wooden mortar, pounding it to the rhythm of cicadas as a child chases a dog, both oblivious to the mosquitoes who see you as the snack bar. The Mekong, wide and unpredictable, is both friend and trickster. Each year it floods, retreating to leave silt so rich it practically begs for rice stalks. The people know this dance well. They dig small canals, guiding water with bamboo pipes, creating an early version of what future kings will turn into hydraulic magic. You feel the sticky warmth of the air on your skin, the drone of insects circling your ears, and you hear a soft chant carried by wind, an animist prayer to spirits hiding in the banyan trees. These villagers believe that everything from the snake coiled under a rock to the river itself has a soul that needs a little sweet talk to behave. Then comes the outside world gliding in on sails. Indian traders arrive, their ships bobbing like wooden ducks on the South China Sea, bringing spices, beads, and most influential of all ideas. They carry with them Sanskrit scripts, Hindu cosmology, and the concept that kings might be more than just bosses, they could be divine. The villagers watch with curiosity as Brahmin priests draw yantras in sand, and soon local rulers adopt these exotic customs, sprinkling Indian religion into their own animist soup. Historians still argue whether this Indianization was a grand cultural wave or just a slow drizzle, but either way, seeds were planted. Among those seeds is the notion of a sacred mountain connecting heaven and earth, Mount Meru in Hindu belief. This image will simmer in the Khmer imagination, waiting centuries to rise in stone. For now, small chiefdoms appear along the Mekong Delta, the most notable being Funan, a kingdom that, according to Chinese records, was founded by an Indian Brahmin who married a local Naga princess. Quirky, absolutely. But this myth reveals how foreign and native blended into something uniquely Khmer. Imagine the wedding reception, half the guests chanting Vedic hymns, the other half offering coconuts to river spirits, all while the bride's serpentine relatives hiss approvingly. Funan thrives on trade, its ports buzzing with merchants from China to India. But every empire has its moody teen phase, and by the 6th century, Funan declines. From its ashes rises Chenla, a state, or rather a cluster of states, further inland closer to the heartland where the Khmer identity will truly bloom. You can almost smell the smoke of change as small settlements consolidate, the jungle humming with life and the future stirring like a restless dream. As you listen to frogs croak in chorus with distant drums, you sense that these early settlers, though unaware, are laying the foundations of something monumental. They tame water, they honor spirits, and they start to believe that rulers could walk between worlds. Soon this belief will crystallize into power, and the story will climb toward mountain peaks of stone. But for now you sway with the tall grasses, lulled by the river's murmur, knowing the dawn of a mighty empire has already begun to glow on the horizon. The morning mist clings stubbornly to the trees as you drift further into time, and the air smells of crushed leaves and something smoky, maybe a farmer's breakfast fire that went rogue. Chenla is on the rise, now having stepped out from Funan's shadow, like a younger sibling who finally found its own cool style. You follow a caravan of ox carts along a dirt path, the wheels squeaking their wooden spokes, wobbling with a kind of optimistic fragility. Traders balance baskets of salt-dried fish and cloth, while a priest mutters Sanskrit verses under his breath, swatting flies with all the grace of an annoyed cat. Chenla isn't one kingdom, but several, a patchwork of territories that sometimes cooperate and often bicker like cousins who can't decide who sits at the head of the dinner table. There's Water Chenla hugging the riverbanks and Land Chenla stretching its arms inland across the rolling hills. Chinese scribes, always nosy with their reports, describe Chenla as strong yet disorganized, a state that could conquer Funan's ports but also somehow trip over its own sandals when it came to succession. Historians still argue whether this division was an official split or just a handy label for outsiders who couldn't keep track of all the local politics. You pause by a wooden house on stilts where children chase each other while adults weave baskets and string up fish to dry in the sun. Daily life here is humble but surprisingly sophisticated. They farm rice with an efficiency born of generations, channeling water through dikes and ditches. Women gather herbs from the forest, their laughter rising over the chirping of birds, while men carve patterns into wooden beams with blades sharp enough to shave a coconut. The smell of fermented fish paste drifts by, and you wrinkle your nose, though some future foodie will probably call it an acquired taste. Culturally, Chenla thrives. Temples of brick and sandstone begin to rise, dedicated to Hindu gods like Shiva, Vishnu, and the enigmatic Brahma, but also to local spirits who refuse to be overshadowed. You wander into a shrine where a priest has smeared sandalwood paste onto a statue's forehead, while an old woman ties a red string to a nearby tree, hedging her bets with both divine forces. This blend of beliefs, animist roots entwined with imported Hinduism, creates something beautifully hybrid. It's like mixing old lullabies with new lyrics, both humming in harmony. Yet power is a slippery fish. Chenla's rulers expand their reach, absorbing smaller polities, but their control flickers. Raids by neighboring groups gnaw at the borders, and infighting becomes a favorite pastime. The kingdom splits, reunites, then splits again. A dance that leaves it vulnerable to outside influence. Quirky tidbit: some inscriptions suggest that rulers occasionally performed elaborate rituals involving the sacrifice of a buffalo or even their own blood to renew their cosmic legitimacy. You imagine the king cutting his arm dramatically, thinking, "This better work." In this swirl of ambition and uncertainty, a new idea brews quietly in the mountains to the north. Local lords whisper of unifying power, not just by force, but by claiming divine right that links the ruler to heaven itself. This concept, borrowed from Indian cosmology and seasoned with Khmer tradition, waits for someone bold enough to wield it fully. The jungle seems to hold its breath, as if sensing a storm that hasn't yet formed but will. As dusk settles, you sit under a sky turning bruised purple fireflies flickering like stray sparks. Chenla hums with life, but its patchwork seams are fraying. A leader will soon rise to stitch them together with something stronger than threads of conquest, something sacred. And as the first stars prick the night, you feel the distant heartbeat of that leader's destiny pulsing faintly through the trees. The air grows heavier as you wander northward through thick forests where vines hang like curtains, and the hum of cicadas swells into a steady backdrop. Somewhere high above, a hornbill flaps its wings, scattering the quiet for just a moment before the jungle swallows the sound again. You are approaching Phnom Kulen, a sacred mountain where mist wraps itself around the peaks, as if hiding secrets too ancient for casual eyes. Here, in the early 9th century, a man named Jayavarman II prepares to change history, not with a battle cry, but with a ritual that blurs the line between mortal and divine. Jayavarman II is no ordinary chief. Having spent time in Java, possibly as a hostage, possibly as an observer, He has returned with big ideas and perhaps an even bigger ego. Historians still argue whether his stay in Java actually happened, or if later chroniclers just liked the drama, but either way the story sticks. He comes back with knowledge of kingship models where rulers claim godlike status, uniting fragmented territories under something more than mere politics. You watch him climb the mountain path, his steps steady his attendants, trailing behind, carrying offerings of flowers, rice, and incense. The air smells sharp with resin as fires crackle in the distance. At the summit, priests arrange a ritual circle. They chant in Sanskrit, their voices weaving through the trees, while the mountain breeze carries hints of sandalwood and burning ghee. Jayavarman steps into the center, the flames casting his shadow high against the rocks. He declares himself Chakravartin, universal monarch, and the Devaraja cult is born, binding his kingship to Shiva himself. The ceremony is said to involve the installation of a sacred lingam representing both the god and the king's divine essence. A quirky detail, some legends suggest a hermit performed the rite and declared that the king's power would last as long as he honored the gods. You imagine the hermit squinting like, "Don't mess this up." From this moment, Jayavarman's authority is no longer just political, it's cosmic. He claims dominion not just over land, but over the spiritual order. Local chiefs perhaps reluctantly bend the knee, realizing that opposing him is like opposing heaven itself. You can almost hear the murmurs among them, half awe, half grumble, as they accept this new structure. The empire of the Khmer is born not with a clash of swords, but with smoke chants, and the belief that their king is tethered to the divine. With unity established, Jayavarman the Seku begins to consolidate his power. He relocates his capitals first to Indrapura, then to Hariharalaya, near what will one day be Angkor. These shifts reflect both strategic thinking and a restless search for the perfect seat of power. He strengthens the administration, extends influence over surrounding territories, and lays the groundwork for an empire that will stretch across much of mainland Southeast Asia. Roads snake out from the center, trade intensifies, and the landscape starts to hum with new order. But not everything is neat. Rebellions spark now and then, like embers refusing to die out. Historians still debate whether Jayavarman ruled with an iron fist or a velvet glove. Inscriptions praise his victories, yet gaps in records hint at struggles unseen. Either way, his legacy sticks. He plants the idea that the Khmer king is no mere mortal, and that this land, fertile, mysterious, and alive with spirits, must be ruled from both earth and heaven. As you descend Phnom Kulen, the stars shimmer through the mist, and you hear the soft gurgle of streams flowing toward the floodplains below. The mountain itself feels like it's exhaling, releasing a new power into the valleys. The people in scattered villages may not fully grasp it yet, but the age of divine kingship has begun to shape their world stone by stone, belief by belief. The jungle seems to nod as if it knows it has just witnessed the first heartbeat of a mighty empire. The sun climbs high as you follow the streams down from Phnom Kulen to the vast floodplain shimmering under its glare, where the land itself seems to breathe in rhythm with the waters. You squint against the brightness, the fields glistening like sheets of jade, dotted with farmers bending in unison as if choreographed by some ancient hand. This is where the Khmer genius truly begins to bloom, not only in stone or ritual, but in water. The rivers and rains that other kingdoms fear, the Khmer embrace and master. You walk beside a canal, its surface mirroring the blue sky, and watch as men with calloused hands guide water through channels cut with remarkable precision. Women plant young rice shoots in rows so straight they could make a perfectionist weep, while children chase dragonflies, their laughter skipping across the fields. This is more than farming, it's engineering. The Khmer are transforming the fickle rhythms of monsoon into a steady heartbeat of prosperity. They carve reservoirs or barrages, massive man-made lakes, so large they swallow the horizon. The East Baray, one of the earliest, stretches out like a small inland sea, and you can't help but gape at its sheer audacity. These berets are not just practical, they're sacred, echoing the cosmic ocean surrounding Mount Meru in Hindu mythology. The king's control over water mirrors his control over the universe. Imagine the villagers staring in awe as water flows exactly where it's supposed to, even in dry months. Quirky tidbit: some inscriptions hint that crocodiles were both feared and revered during these hydraulic projects, with offerings thrown into the water to keep them appeased. You picture a worker muttering, "Please don't eat me," as he tosses a chicken into the depths. As water nourishes the fields, cities sprout. Early Angkorian settlements rise, centered around temples and palaces where wooden structures sway gently in the breeze. The capital at Hariharalaya begins to hum, with artisans carving sandstone, traders bartering spices, and priests reciting prayers under banyan trees. You drift through narrow paths lined with houses on stilts where smoke curls from clay stoves and the smell of rice mingles with incense. The marketplace buzzes with voices, the clatter of pottery, the bray of livestock, and somewhere a lute plucks a lazy tune. All this prosperity feeds something bigger: ambition. The kings who follow Jayavarman II, Indravarman, Pias Yasovarman, I expand the hydraulic network, building barrays so vast they dwarf lakes in neighboring lands. They raise temples, each one higher, more intricate, more determined to touch the sky. Historians still argue whether these massive works were purely about irrigation or also about power projection. But walking here, you sense it's both. Water keeps rice bowls full, but it also reflects the king's image back to the heavens, saying, "Look what I command." The connection between divine kingship and control over nature becomes clearer with every step. The berets, the canals, the reservoirs, they are arteries of the empire pulsing with life. Farmers begin to trust that the king is not just a man, but a being who can bend rivers and seasons. You feel the weight of that belief thick as the humid air pressing on your skin. Even as you marvel, there's an undertone of fragility. This system depends on balance between floods and droughts, between labor and rest, between human will and nature's moods. For now, the Khmer seem to have found harmony, but you know the jungle is always patient, always waiting. As twilight descends, you stand by the edge of a beret. The water reflects the setting sun, turning it into liquid fire. Fireflies spark to life, hovering over the surface, as if guarding it. You close your eyes and listen to the chorus of frogs, the rustle of palm leaves, the distant drum of a festival somewhere in the city. The empire is rising strong and serene, its foundations not only in stone, but in the living veins of water that crisscross the land. And tomorrow those foundations will carry something even greater toward the heavens. The night air cools only slightly as you climb the worn steps of a temple that seems to pierce the stars, each stone block humming faintly as if it remembers the hands that shaped it. You are standing in front of one of the earliest temple mountains, a style that would become the Khmer Empire's signature calling card to the cosmos. The scent of incense lingers in the breeze, mixing with the sweet smell of flowering frangipani, and somewhere in the darkness a gecko chirps like it's giving commentary. These temples are not just places of worship, they are cosmic diagrams carved in sandstone. The architects designed them as representations of Mount Meru, the mythical mountain at the center of the universe in Hindu belief, surrounded by oceans, the berets, and ringed by lesser peaks, the temple enclosures. You trace your fingers along carvings of celestial dancers, the apsaras, their stone hips swaying eternally, and you almost expect one to wink at you. This architecture whispers that the king doesn't just rule land, he rules the entire cosmos, at least on a good day. The early temples, Bakong Prea Kolole, rise proudly under kings like Indravarman Mi and Yasovarman Yitte. Each ruler competes to outshine the last, stacking stone higher, making carving sharper, ensuring that when the gods look down, they see the king's devotion reflected in every block. Historians still argue whether these projects were built purely out of faith or if they were also political flexing, but let's be honest, it's probably both. You can almost hear a king saying, Oh, you think your temple's tall? Watch this. As you wander through the corridors, the play of light and shadow feels intentional, as if the temple itself orchestrates your awe. The sanctum at the center houses a lingam symbolizing Shiva, the cosmic energy, and by extension, the king's own divine essence. Priests tend to it with offerings of flowers, oil, and food, though occasionally a curious monkey sneaks in to snatch a banana, proving that even sacred spaces have their clowns. The artisans who craft these temples work tirelessly chiseling intricate bas-reliefs that tell stories from the Ramayana and Mahabharata, while also slipping in local myths. One panel shows a naga coiled protectively. Another depicts a battle where demons tumble dramatically, their expressions carved with almost comic exaggeration. These details are not just decoration, they are messages teaching the people pleasing the gods and cementing the ruler's place in both worlds. Outside, the city hums. Traders move along roads connecting the empire to its neighbors, Siam, Champa, Dai Viet, and goods, like silk, spices, and ceramics, flow like a river of wealth. The markets smell of grilled fish and sweet palm sugar cakes, and laughter spills from clusters of people gossiping about everything from harvests to palace scandals. Life here is vibrant, a dance between the sacred and the ordinary. But the temples also carry a quiet weight. They require enormous labor stone quarried from mountains, floated down rivers, dragged by elephants and countless hands. Some workers sing to keep rhythm, others mutter curses at the heat. Quirky tidbit legends say certain blocks were so perfectly fitted that even a blade of grass couldn't slip between them. Looking at the walls now, you almost believe it. As the moon rises, you climb to the temple's highest tier. The wind brushes your face, and below the beret mirrors the moonlight like a silver shield. You can feel how these structures blending earth and heaven solidify the idea that the king is not just a man, but a cosmic axis holding the world together. The stars glitter above as if nodding in approval. From this height, the empire's future feels limitless. Stone by stone, belief by belief, the Khmer kings are carving their power into eternity. And soon, under a king named Suryavarman II, this ambition will erupt into the most iconic creation of them all, a temple so grand it will become the very symbol of Cambodia itself.
Yeah.
The air is thick with anticipation as you step into the bustling heart of the 12th century, where the Khmer Empire stretches its power far and wide, and a king named Suryavarman II prepares to etch his legacy into eternity. The streets of the capital hum like a beehive, the clatter of cartwheels mingling with the shouts of traders and the occasional trumpet of an elephant strutting through as if it owns the place. Above it all, the sun blazes, turning the sandstone blocks of half-built structures into golden embers. You smell dust, sweat, and the faint sweetness of lotus flowers laid out as offerings. Suryavarman II is no small dreamer. He envisions a temple so vast, so breathtaking, that it will not only honor Vishnu, but also secure his place as the king who touches the heavens. This will be Angkor Wat, the jewel of Khmer architecture, a temple mountain that dwarfs everything before it. You watch lines of workers, thousands of them dragging sandstone blocks from quarries miles away. Elephants groan under loads, their massive feet leaving prints in the soft earth, while artisans chip delicate patterns into stone as easily as you might carve butter. Well, maybe not easily. The blisters on their hands suggest otherwise. The construction is a symphony of labor. Scaffolding creaks, hammers ring, and voices chant to keep spirits high. The sandstone itself is hauled from Phnom Kulen, floated down rivers on rafts, then rolled into place with a precision that would make even modern engineers blush. Quirky tidbit: some legends say the temple was built by divine architects overnight, because honestly the scale is so staggering that people figured only gods could manage it that fast. Historians still argue whether its rapid construction was fueled by sheer manpower, extraordinary planning, or a touch of mythic exaggeration. As towers rise, their lotus bud tops pierce the sky, and the galleries bloom with carvings so intricate they seem to breathe. You trail your fingers over bas-reliefs depicting the churning of the ocean of milk a cosmic tug-of-war where gods and demons pull a naga to create the elixir of immortality. The carvings stretch for hundreds of meters, telling epics in stone with a level of detail that makes you forget to blink. Every Apsara dancer, every warrior, every celestial being seems frozen mid-movement, their faces serene despite the drama around them. Suryavarman too himself is immortalized here, carved into the walls, leading his troops, seated on his throne, standing among celestial beings as if he belongs to both worlds. You can almost hear his voice in the wind, saying, "Yes, this is my masterpiece," and he's not wrong. Angkor Wat's central tower soars 65 meters high, its symmetry perfect, its layout aligned with cosmic order, and perhaps even the stars. The temple faces west, unusual for Khmer temples, sparking endless debates. Historians still argue whether this means it was intended as a funerary temple, or if it's simply oriented to honor Vishnu, who is often associated with the West. The mystery adds to its allure like a secret whispered by the stones. You wander through its courtyards as monks in saffron robes glide by their bare feet, whispering against the stone. The scent of incense drifts around, blending with the faint aroma of lotus petals left by pilgrims. In the moat surrounding the temple, lotus flowers bloom, their reflections shimmering in water that mirrors the entire structure. It's as if the temple floats between heaven and earth, a bridge connecting both realms. Outside the sacred walls, life continues, markets bustle, farmers tend their fields, and the roads hum with traffic as the empire thrives on trade and tribute. Soldiers train merchants, gossip, and somewhere a child tosses pebbles into a pond, rippling the reflection of greatness. Yet beneath this grandeur, whispers of strain emerge. The resources poured into Angkor Wat are immense, and tensions at the borders simmer quietly. As dusk settles, the temple glows amber in the dying light, every tower bathed in fire's hue, every carving catching a final glint. You stand at the causeway watching the sun sink directly behind the central spire, and for a moment it feels as if the temple itself is drinking the sun. The air softens, the sky deepens, and a hush falls over the land. Angkor Wat stands complete, a testament to ambition, devotion, and the belief that stone can hold eternity. You close your eyes, feeling the warmth fade from the stones beneath your feet. The empire has reached a pinnacle so high it seems untouchable. But as history loves to remind us, even the brightest peaks cast the longest shadows, and the story of the Khmer is far from finished. The air is thicker now, holding the scent of rain-soaked earth as you step into a world forever changed by chaos. The empire has suffered blows, foreign invasions, internal unrest, a terrible sack by the Chams in the late 12th century that left temples burning and spirits trembling. Yet from this darkness rises a king unlike any before Jayavarman VII, the Buddhist monarch who rebuilds not just cities, but souls. You find yourself standing in the ruins of a once proud temple, charred stones still faintly smelling of ash, when the sound of construction begins anew, echoing like a heartbeat through the jungle. Jayavarman VII ascends the throne around 1181, and he wastes no time in proving that resilience is a Khmer specialty. Unlike his Hindu predecessors, he embraces Mahayana Buddhism, and with it a vision of kingship that focuses on compassion as much as power. Historians still argue whether his turn to Buddhism was a genuine spiritual awakening or a clever political move to unify a fractured kingdom, but walking beside him you feel the sincerity in every step. His statues, carved with downcast eyes and a serene smile, radiate a calm strength that feels almost like a whispered blessing. He rebuilds Angkor, but he does not stop there. Under his rule, the city expands to its largest extent. Roads unfurl across the empire like veins, and hundreds of rest houses and hospitals spring up along them. Yes, hospitals, an almost unheard of concept for the era. You picture travelers stopping for a bowl of rice and a healing herb poultice, marveling that the king cares even for the weary. Quirky tidbit inscriptions praise Jayavarman VII for suffering the suffering of his people, a poetic way of saying he had empathy on an imperial scale. And then there is the Bayon. Oh, the Bayon. You walk beneath its towers and feel dozens of stone eyes follow you not in menace but in quiet watchfulness. Each tower bears those giant smiling faces believed to be either the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara or Jayavarman VII himself, wearing divine serenity like a crown. The faces gaze out in every direction as if blessing the land with perpetual compassion. The temple's corridors twist like a maze, its bas-reliefs buzzing with life markets, naval battles, daily scenes of fishing and cooking, even images of Chinese merchants. You laugh softly when you notice a carving of a man holding what looks suspiciously like a puppy, proving that even in sacred spaces ordinary love slips in. The empire under Jayavarman VII pulses with energy. Roads are alive with merchants and monks, canals hum with boats, and the cities teem with artisans and traders from across Asia. Yet this golden glow carries shadows. The monumental building projects demand immense labor and resources, straining the population. Wars against Champa and Dai Viet grind on costly in both blood and treasure. Historians still debate whether Jayavarman's benevolence was felt equally by everyone, or if his compassion had limits when it came to dissent. As Buddhism spreads, older Hindu traditions persist, blending into a unique Khmer spiritual tapestry. You see villagers offering incense to both Buddha and Shiva, hedging their prayers just in case. The fusion is delicate, a harmony that feels fragile yet beautiful. Temples rise not only for gods but for healing, for rest, for the soul's comfort. You sit on the steps of a roadside hospital as a monk tends to a traveler's wounds, chanting softly the smell of herbs, mingling with the earthy scent of rain. By night, the Bayon's faces glow faintly in moonlight, their smiles inscrutable yet strangely reassuring. You stand at the center, the air cool on your skin, and feel the weight of Jayavarman VII's legacy pressing softly against you, not heavy, but steady like a hand on your shoulder. His reign brings the empire to one last luminous peak, a gentle brilliance before the slow dusk creeps in. The serene faces seem to know this, smiling at the future, even as it begins to shift. As dawn breaks, you step away from the temple, the mist curling around its towers. The empire breathes in the quiet after victory, and though it still shines, you sense a change in the air, a stillness that precedes something turning. For now, however, the Bayon watches over it all, smiling as if to say, it is enough. The first light of morning spills across the city like liquid gold, catching the edges of wooden houses on stilts, shimmering on the surface of lotus ponds and warming the sandstone faces of temples. You step into this vibrant daily life where the empire under Jayavarman VII's legacy hums with energy, not only from grand projects but also from ordinary moments that make up the pulse of a civilization. The air is thick with the scent of roasted fish, the sweet smoke of incense, and the slightly sour tang of fermenting rice wine tucked away in clay jars. You wander through the markets where traders shout prices over the chatter of buyers and the clucking of chickens tied to baskets. Spices pile high in woven trays, turmeric, ginger, and fragrant lemongrass, while silk hangs in dazzling colors that ripple like water in the breeze. Potters shape clay into jars with rhythmic precision, smiths hammer bronze into tools and ornaments, and jewelers polish gems that sparkle under the sun. You pause to watch a woman carve intricate designs into a small ivory comb while telling a story to her child, her voice rising and falling like the song of the cicadas around you. Temples loom nearby, their courtyards alive with monks chanting and villagers lighting candles. This is an empire where spirituality is stitched into every corner of life. Hindu shrines and Buddhist monasteries stand side by side, their bells ringing at different rhythms yet blending into a single harmony. Historians still argue whether this coexistence was always peaceful or if there were tensions under the surface, but here and now the prayers rise together into the sky like smoke curling into the wind. Education thrives in the monasteries where boys learn to read Sanskrit and Khmer scripts, their voices softly echoing across the stone walls. Scholars copy manuscripts onto palm leaves, preserving sacred texts and practical knowledge alike. You peek over a monk's shoulder and see delicate handwriting flowing like water, the letters curling and looping with almost artistic grace. Meanwhile, outside the monastery, girls learn from mothers and grandmothers herbal remedies, weaving techniques, the secrets of cooking perfect sticky rice. Knowledge here is not locked away but passed down like treasured seeds. The empire's roads are busy arteries carrying ox carts piled with goods, soldiers marching with spears that glint in the sunlight, and pilgrims making their slow way to sacred sites. The hum of life on these roads is almost musical. The creak of wheels, the rhythm of hooves, the soft slap of sandals on packed earth. Quirky tidbits, some rest houses built under Jayavarman. Seven's orders offered not only lodging, but also free soup to travelers, proving that even ancient road trips had pit stops for snacks. At the edges of the cities, the countryside spreads wide and green, dotted with farmers bending low in the paddies, their reflections rippling in the shallow water. Buffalo plod lazily through the fields, pulling wooden plows as birds dart overhead. Children play on the dikes, splashing mud, while elders sit in the shade of palm trees weaving mats and telling stories about gods, spirits and kings. Life here is simple, but not without joy, a daily rhythm of planting, harvesting, and celebrating the seasons. Festivals burst through this rhythm like fireworks. You find yourself swept into one where drums thunder and dancers in glittering costumes move like flames, their hands twisting gracefully to the beat. Apsara dancers with golden crowns and flowing silk reenact celestial stories while villagers cheer and toss flowers. The air smells of roasted meats and sweet cakes, and someone hands you a cup of rice wine that burns warmly down your throat. For a moment, under the torchlight, the line between human and divine feels as thin as silk. Yet even in this golden age of culture, faint cracks appear. The temples grow older, their stones wearing down under the weight of time and weather. Resources are stretched thin by the demands of constant building, and whispers of border tensions drift through the market gossip. Historians still debate whether this cultural zenith was sustainable or whether it was a final flare before the slow fade began. As the sun dips low, casting everything in honeyed light, you climb a temple tower to look over it all, the bustling city, the endless rice fields, the shimmering water of the Berets. The empire is at its most human here, grand in its monuments, but alive in the laughter, the prayers, and the quiet labor of its people. You close your eyes, letting the sound of the market fade into the chirping of night insects, and for a moment you feel part of this world, breathing with it as it glows in its fullest light. The heat lingers as the days roll on, and you notice a subtle shift in the air, something uneasy stirring beneath the calm. The Khmer Empire, still proud and magnificent, begins to face threats that creep in like vines wrapping around old stone. You walk along a crumbling road where weeds poke through the cracks, and though life continues, markets still bustle, temples still echo with chants, you can sense the weight of pressures gathering at the edges of this world. From the west, the Siamese kingdom of Sukhothai grows restless, its warriors testing borders, their drums beating faintly in the distance, like a warning you can almost feel in your chest. To the east, Dai Viet consolidates power, while Champa remains a thorn that never quite goes away. These neighbors watch the Khmer lands with sharp eyes, waiting for moments of weakness. Raids strike, battles flare, and the empire bleeds, even if its heart still beats strong. Historians still argue whether these conflicts were decisive blows or just slow erosions, but either way the stability once so firm begins to wobble. Inside the court is not immune to storms. Rivalries fester, power struggles spark, and shifts in religion add layers of complexity. Buddhism, once embraced under Jayavarman VII, begins to compete with the resurgence of Hindu traditions. Kings oscillate between faiths, sometimes incorporating both, other times favoring one over the other. The temples reflect this tug-of-war with old shrines, repurposed statues, swapped and new carvings layered over older ones. You see the marks of these changes as you walk through half-renovated halls where a Buddha's calm face watches over remnants of Hindu deities. The blending is beautiful, but it hints at uncertainty. The empire's lifeline. The water system also begins to falter. The vast barrays and canals, once the pride of the land, demand constant maintenance. Without meticulous care, silt clogs, channels, dikes weaken, and fields suffer. Farmers murmur that harvests are not as bountiful as before, and when drought strikes or floods rage, the cracks in the system widen. You kneel by a dried canal bed, the earth cracked like old parchment, and wonder if the empire's mastery over water is slipping away one neglected ditch at a time. In the villages, life continues, but with a weariness creeping in. Taxes weigh heavy, labor demands for temples, and infrastructure never cease, and the glory of the empire feels more distant with each passing season. Traders whisper about safer ports elsewhere, and some roads that once thrummed with traffic now lie quiet dust, gathering where carts once rolled. Quirky tidbits: some stories from this time claim that villagers began to leave offerings not only to gods and spirits, but also to termites, because the insects were eating through old wooden structures faster than anyone could fix them. You chuckle, but also sense the desperation behind such gestures. As the empire struggles with both external threats and internal fatigue, the Siamese grow bolder. Their armies advance, and one by one outlying territories slip from Khmer hands. The city of Angkor still stands breathtaking, but its aura of invincibility begins to dim. You walk its streets at twilight, and the laughter in the markets is softer tinged with worry. Even the Bayans' smiling faces seem to hold a hint of melancholy, as if they know what lies ahead. Historians still argue whether the decline was inevitable. Was it environmental collapse, political mismanagement, endless wars, or simply the natural cycle of empires rising and falling? The truth is likely all of these, weaving together into a slow unraveling that no one event could stop. The jungle, always patient, begins to creep closer, roots nudging stones, leaves spilling over walls as if reclaiming what was borrowed. You climb a temple tower as night falls, and from this height you see the flicker of distant fires where Siamese armies camp beyond the horizon. The stars above burn bright, cold, and indifferent to the struggles below. The Khmer Empire is still alive, but the edges fray more with each passing year. You breathe in the humid night air, heavy with the scent of rain and something bittersweet, and you know you are standing on the edge of twilight. The drums of the Siamese echo faintly, and somewhere deep in the jungle, an owl hoots as if counting down the moments until the next chapter begins. The dawn rises slow and grey as you wander through a city that no longer hums with the same certainty it once did. Angkor, though still majestic, now feels different, quieter, as if holding its breath. The grand avenues are cracked in places where weeds push through. The markets are smaller, and the once ceaseless flow of caravans has thinned to a trickle. You pass beneath the serene faces of the Bayan, and though they still smile, you sense that they are smiling through sorrow, watching history shift beneath them. The Siamese drums finally come closer, not just echoes on the horizon, but real relentless beats that rattle the air. The 15th century brings a final series of blows as the armies of Ayutthaya advance, and in 1431 they sack Angkor. You watch flames lick the sky, hear the crash of collapsing gates, and smell the acrid smoke of burning wood and rice stores. People flee with what they can carry, their cries mingling with the roar of battle. Historians still argue whether this sack was the decisive end or simply the final push in a decline already long underway. But either way, Angkor never fully recovers. The capital shifts southward away from the temples, leaving them to the slow embrace of the jungle. You walk through these abandoned structures in the aftermath. Roots twist around walls, prying stones apart with patient strength. Vines dangle from towers like curtains, and the forest floor creeps up temple stairs. Monkeys chatter where priests once chanted, Parrots scream in the halls where kings once walked. Quirky tidbit early explorers, centuries later, would find massive tree roots gripping the temples so tightly that they looked like giant hands refusing to let go. You run your fingers along one such route and feel the pulse of time itself. Yet even as nature reclaims the city, the legacy of the Khmer Empire refuses to die. The temples stand scarred but proud, their carvings still whispering stories of gods and kings to anyone willing to listen. Angkor Wat, despite its abandonment, remains a beacon. When the French stumbled upon it centuries later, they were stunned into silence, unable to believe that human hands had built something so vast in the middle of the jungle. It became a symbol not just of Cambodia, but of human creativity reaching for the divine. The culture too survives. Khmer traditions endure in dance, in language, in the stories told under starlit skies. Buddhism, which had woven itself deeply into Khmer life, becomes the quiet heartbeat of the people guiding them through the centuries of foreign rule and hardship that follow. Angkor's ruins are not dead. They are sleeping, carrying memories in their stones. The empire may have fallen, but its spirit lingers, flowing through rivers, whispering through leaves, glowing in every smile of Apsara dancers even today. You sit on the steps of Angkor Wat as evening falls, the air warm and still. The temple reflects perfectly in its moat, as if two worlds, past and present, exist side by side. Fireflies blink lazily and the moon rises, bathing the sandstone in silver. You close your eyes and hear the echoes, the chants of priests, the clatter of markets, the laughter of children, the thundering of elephants, the faint whisper of a king declaring himself divine on Phnom Kulen. All of it layered and alive even in the silence. And now as the jungle breathes around you, the story softens. The night settles gently over the ruins, and the stars above seem to lean closer, as if curious about the empire that once tried to reach them. The trees sway slowly, their leaves rustling like lullabies, and the air cools against your skin. You take a deep breath, feeling the calm spread through your chest. The ruins no longer feel lonely, they feel at peace, like an old soul, finally resting after a life of greatness and struggle. The roots that clutch the stones are not only reclaiming, they are protecting, holding the memory tight. The temples stand as guardians of stories, waiting patiently for anyone who wishes to listen. Even now, centuries later, travelers walk these halls and feel the same awe. You feel the same quiet wonder that turns footsteps into whispers. And so, as you drift away from Angkor, Wat, the moonlight follows you, wrapping everything in silver. The jungle hums softly, the crickets sing, and the faces of the Bayon smile one last time as you pass, as if blessing your journey onward. The Khmer Empire's rise and fall fades into a gentle echo, lingering not as a tragedy, but as a dream carved in stone, rooted in earth, and forever reaching toward the stars. Sleep now, knowing that stories like these never truly end. They rest, they breathe, and they wait for you to return.